story time. So I told you guys that I was going to do my next video on psychedelics, and finally I'm doing it. It's about time. So if you don't already know, psychedelics have been quite the hit lately when it comes to people, trying to find alternative ways of healing, spiritual awakenings. It's become something that doctors and researchers are trying to find ways to integrate it into therapy. So psychedelic and drug-related therapies using things like LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, MDMA, and ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is the one that I did, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. So I'll just give a little brief overview of psychedelics. They basically alter your state of consciousness and can cause things like hallucinations, or does certain things that throughout history people have commented as being a very spiritual journey, or a something that connects us to a realm that we can't ever really comprehend when we're just going about our normal day. And when you're in this altered state of consciousness, it's like you gain access to this new way of thinking. And it has become a very widely spoken about, trend nowadays, especially when it comes to people who have suffered trauma and PTSD, have started to lean more towards doing therapy that's induced by psychedelics. And there's tons of research too, lots of doctors trying to get it legalized, very conclusive, evident research studies showing how effective it is in healing PTSD and trauma at a much faster pace than just regular therapy. I even met a girl at my ayahuasca retreat. She said she had done 20 years of therapy, 20 years of counseling or psychologist, I can't remember. But anyways, and then the 10 to 20 days that she was at this retreat, she's done ayahuasca like 10 times now. She said that has helped her more than the whole 20 years of therapy. It has helped her really come to a lot of realizations and healing, and brought her to that place that she couldn't go to on her own. And I've just heard so many stories, and I'll just tell you mine as well in a little bit after I kind of briefly overview. So some of the psychological effects that it has, as well as some of the chemistry as well in the brain that happens when you're on psychedelics, is it essentially, at least this one's for ayahuasca here, it says that it has shown, like, some of the chemicals in there have shown to promote neurogenesis, which is the formation of new neurons in the brain, and as well as stimulated neural stem cell proliferation, migration, and differentiation into adult neurons. So it has a lot of effects on the brain in terms of the neural connections, and sort of forming new connections and opening up, basically just opening up your brain and stimulating areas of your brain that have never really been stimulated before. It's like accessing new parts of your consciousness. And I'm pretty sure this is quite similar for some of the other psychedelics, but the effects of it are different in terms of like your hallucinations, or whatever it is that you experience. It's quite different. But ayahuasca is very intense. It's DMT mixed with like a bunch of other things, but the DMT, it lasts a very long time, I think like 4 to 6 hours, and it's one of the most potent, like intense hallucinogenic, natural hallucinogenic, I believe, known to man. And whereas MDMA, it's something that stimulates a lot of the, I think it was serotonin in your brain, or dopamine. That one for me was also, I did that once at a music festival, and it was like the best day of my life. Would not recommend doing it often because you might fuck up the brain chemistry, and start to get your brains dependent on this drug for serotonin, and which is the happy love drug, or neurotransmitter, and but it really does alter your perspective. Like when you come down and you kind of come back to real life, you do look at life differently. You just have to understand that you can't keep taking the drug to get back to that high. I go into these experiences with the intention of learning, so don't go into the drugs intentionally to seek a high and get your dose of happiness or whatever. To me, it's a learning experience. It's to open your consciousness. It's to expand your way of thinking, because it really does have an effect on the way that you think and the way that you view life, and how you connect with yourself and how you connect with other people. It's really a positive experience. So another thing here, it says that, so MDMA there's a lot of studies as well that it can treat PTSD. I've heard that with LSD as well, and ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms. Like, I haven't tried mushrooms yet. I hear great things about them for the most part. But again, everyone always says you need to be in a safe place, somewhere you feel safe, or else you'll get so overwhelmed you might have a really bad trip. So that's something to really keep in mind, is really just knowing when you're ready, and knowing that you trust your environment and the people that you're around, because you are going into a very vulnerable place, exploring parts of your consciousness that you've never really explored before. And sometimes, in every human, we all have a dark side. We all have parts of our consciousness that aren't so pleasant, and we have parts of it that are beautiful and just, beyond this reality, beyond what we could ever comprehend in terms of its divinity. And so there are both aspects. There's the light and the dark, and you might get a bad trip and you might get a good one. But that's part of being human. You can't always expect everything to be sunshine and rainbows. You have to be willing to go to that dark place when it's time. And sometimes drugs will just take you there at a more accelerated pace. And when you think about therapy, or when people talk to a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist, people only go as far as their psyche can handle. Sometimes people just can't go to that place. They're too scared, or there's too much repression, or they've psychologically figured out ways to block certain parts of their past or their memories and not have any access to it, because it might be too traumatic, or so this is what these psychedelics can do, is when you're with people you trust, especially if you're with if it's for therapeutic reasons, if you're with a professional and a trained doctor, they can help you through this trip and help you learn how to heal those parts of yourself that you might not be ready to go to, but those drugs can help take you there and can help transform the part in your brain, the way that you see things. It can transform that so that you can look at it differently and see it from a completely different perspective. And so that's why it brings you to this altered state of consciousness, so that you can view life differently. And to me, that's why it's so healing, is because we're just so stuck in our way of seeing things. And most of the time, pretty much everybody is very limited. We're all so limited by our way of thinking. But yet we convince ourselves and try to convince the world that we have it all figured out, and that we're fine. But really, sometimes we're not. And sometimes our very limited minds can keep us trapped in bad habits, in addiction, in this dark place where we treat people terribly, where our whole lives start to fall apart because we don't want to face what needs to be faced inside of us. So that's why our own minds, our own psyches are so limited, and this is where the help of these altered states of consciousness come into play. It can help you finally see the world differently. It helps you see yourself differently. So that's kind of how I see the importance of, at least once trying this altered state of mind, at least once in your life. Because people are very close-minded and very much tend to be ignorant. And this really takes you out of that. And, obviously don't be stupid and take it too far and overdose, or, do it in a very safe place with people that you trust. So that's obviously important. But anyways, so now I will tell you about my story with ayahuasca.